Hello, everybody. Hi. Greetings to you for this week's episode of Dead Money. I meant to release episode 14 several days before I actually did. I had a delay because I had to switch platforms from where I host the show, and I apparently wasn't able to redirect the show myself to the new platform. I needed someone from the technical team to do it. Except my original host went MIA on me for like 3 days. I was messaging the customer service team on Friday morning about it, but they told me the technical team isn't around on the weekend. I said, "What are you talking about? It's Friday. This is a business day, not the weekend." No response until the 3-day weekend, which no one had, except for the people I needed help from, had ended. But all's well that ends well. Anyway, so I said I was going to be ending my poker vacation very soon and headed for 510 at the Bellagio, but I still haven't done that. I'm still goofing off for the most part. And what can I say? Goofing off, especially when it's from poker, is like a warm bed. Easy to get into, hard to get out of. And I won't force myself out because why should I? I don't want to be a slave to poker more than I already am. I don't want to be a slave to society more than I already am. It's been no love lost. Just lately I'm just remembering a little more perpetually that the whole point of playing poker, whatever work you do, is so you can stop. Whether it's temporarily or entirely. I don't mean that I'm getting out, although poker is not such a bad thing to get out of. Tell people that all the time. I've just been enjoying the success. And isn't how often you can chill something of a direct measure as to how much you've succeeded at something? So at least one of them. But as a poker player, if you never just chill, then what are you playing for? Besides the fact that maybe you haven't succeeded yet, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about if you've crushed over a period of time, even if it's just less than a year, I'm wondering who loves poker so much that they can just never get enough of it no matter how well they might have done. That whole concept just seems like an oxymoron because the whole point of poker is seeing who can actually persevere through the infinite times it breaks you emotionally, or almost breaks you. Because it's going to ravage everybody. And that, of course, is a huge reason why playing professional poker is doable, but it's also why it's so hard, because just in talking about the game itself, who the hell wants variance all the time? Forget about all the insufferable cunt hairs you have to put it with on top of it, because they're even worse. They make variants seem like your favorite porno video. And I barely even watch porno. I've had consecutive meals between views for years now. Anyway, I know sometimes in my mind or to their face I make fun of people who bemoan their bad luck because this poker, bruh, you signed up for this nonsense. Every time you sit down, you are asking the universe for the very real possibility of having a most miserable day. And no matter what, you're not entitled to anything. Poker owes you nothing. So while it's true that technically you have no business complaining about running bad at something you know how easily you can just run bad at the same time, fuck it. Poker's too demanding, it's too cruel and too unforgiving to genuinely say, "Oh well, that's just the way the cookie crumbles," every fucking day of the week. So gripe away, whine, complain, do it all. Just off the table. Because it does relieve some of the aggravation, at least for me. Just be careful, though, because there's a fine line and a big difference between decompressing aggravation and all but wanting it to continue so that you can keep complaining about it. I said that to the tables once, years ago. That I almost don't even want to start running good because that means I can't complain about how bad I'm running. But almost doesn't count. You know, a lot of people hate losing so much more than they like winning, and that's why they burn out sooner or later. Or in most cases, they just crash and burn before then. Sometimes I think I hate losing more than I like winning. But I don't even know if it's about that. In so many ways, it's just not about winning or losing the money at all. I just like trying to fuck with people. I like trying to twist their brain into a pretzel. I like making people uncomfortable and nervous. I like making people hate me and have fantasies about killing me, like that lip filler typhoon who claimed she was in the Air Force and knew Krav Maga. I like making people second guess themselves and lose their confidence. I like making people arrogantly think they're going to take me to fucking Chinatown. Next thing they know, they're mucking their cards and reaching into their pocket. I like making people feel like they've just been hit by a train. I like making people think they know, like the back of their hand, that I'm just some nit who's got no balls. Next thing they don't know, they're walking away from a huge pot and will never, ever know they were just robbed blind. I like running back the tape in a tough spot and folding because I know I need to, and making them say, God damn it, to themselves after not getting the big call they've been jerking or double-clicking themselves off to all day. When you tank fold correctly to somebody and they muck, yeah, they get to look cool and badass in front of everyone, but they don't feel cool. Their cards won the battle one way or another, but you won the war. I try to be caring for people off the table, but on the table is when I get to satisfy my evil cravings and pillage their psyches, torturing their little, oh, look at me, I'm a badass complex, and teach them a lesson that if they're lucky, they won't forget. I just like wrecking people in every which way at this stupid game. I don't need to go into countries and take over their land and rape all their women and enslave all their children and eat all their chickens to get my thrills of domination. No, I just want to terrorize them at poker. And hopefully have nightmares about my face. It just never gets old. Still need long breaks sometimes because poker doesn't just allow for a lot of vacation time. It requires it, whether you know it or not. And because it's required, that almost makes it like less of a vacation when you're taking it. Which is funny because vacation is supposed to be like the best thing ever and the thing that everyone always wants. But oddly enough, nothing feels better than when you're locked in at poker. Just eager to play and being in the everyday groove and winning. I don't break when I'm winning. I break when I'm losing. Or when something just, I don't know, where I just don't like the way things are going. That was especially the case when I was playing higher. Losing streaks would take me so long to get through because I'd be so dejected that I'd play a lot less. Just want to go enjoy life some other way. But when I'm winning, when there's water in the well, I'll go all the time. And it's all just the recency bias of our tiny little pea brains that we barely even know how to use apart from knowing when it's time to eat and when you need to get it in. So the breaks for me always happen on a whim. The need comes without warning. One day you're fine with the groove, but the next day something happens that is so fucked up that suddenly now, no, this is too much. Because your whole competitive equilibrium is disturbed. And just like that, you're looking somewhere else to get your thrills. And it's shocking because you were planning like this many hours and blah, blah, blah. But now you're just like, fuck it. But it's very liberating to get to do that. Infinite. And it's fair. For what a poker player has to suffer through in order to be one, it's only fair that he or she gets to decide everything. So for this week, I'll just dig into some archives and talk about some history. I once read an old story somewhere about the old Texan poker legend, Thomas Amarillo Slim Preston. If you haven't heard of Amarillo Slim, then you must be pretty new to poker. I don't remember every last detail about this particular story, but I know what's pertinent. Slim was set to play a heads-up match of 5-card draw with this woman whose name I can't recall, but I don't think lip filler had been invented yet. Before they started, Slim, by design, ordered her some tea. And as she was drinking her tea, he asked her, let's just name her lip filler in honor of the Krav Maga master who spared my life recently. Slim asked her, how do you like your tea? And lip filler said, oh, I like my tea just fine, Slim. Then the game started. And I think about 15 minutes into the game, she went all in against him. And as Slim was deciding what to do, he asked her, how do you like your hand, lip filler? And she said something like, oh, I like it just fine, Slim. Only this time, she sounded different. Now, the whole purpose of him ordering her that tea and asking her how she liked it was to get some type of feel for what she looked and sounded like when she was relaxed and comfortable with nothing pressing at hand. So when this hand happens, the lip filler goes all in and he asks her how she likes her hand, and she sounds substantially different than from how she did before. Now he thinks he should call her, and he did. And he knew he caught her when she asked him, like, oh, do you have a couple pairs or something? He didn't. I think he only had a pair of 6s. And if you've ever seen the movie Maverick from 1994, where, spoiler coming, beware, Mel Gibson knocks Jodie Foster out of this huge, stupid $25,000 winner-take-all boat tournament they were playing. And she was also bluffing, and he beat her with a pair of 6s. They didn't have the whole ordering the tea element to it, but I'm guessing whoever wrote the script probably knew about this story with Amarillo Slim. If he didn't, then that is some fucking coincidence. But like they say, truth is stranger than fiction, and stranger things than that have happened. For instance, I have more than 0 friends. Now, I want to tell you about a hand I played on New Year's Day in 2014. I was 28. I was playing 10-20 at the Bellagio. It was a long, action-filled day. I was up a lot. Then I lost a really big pot. Then I started winning again. I was in for 6K, but I had about 12,000 when this hand started. I don't know how many hours into the game, but it was a bunch. I had kings under the gun and raised to 80. 4x was the common open in this time. If you only went 3x back then, you were probably just a nit. Anyway, there were 2 calls and then the cutoff 3-bet to 400. Now the cutoff was this short Vietnamese rig. And I'm pretty sure he's the only 10-20 reg that is still around playing those stakes or higher from when I first got here. And during this time, there were so many regs who didn't respect him. Everyone would just always say how much he god modes everybody, and I did see him run pretty sick. So, I guess I could understand some of that, but how much arguing with long-term results can you really do? He's one of those guys who plays by feel, so his technical understanding is less than brilliant, but his ability to feel out situations is very strong, and on top of that, he possesses a skill that not many people have, and that is he gets a lot of fishy players to play extra bad against him, and a lot of money ends up in his stack because of that. I've probably logged more hours with him than any other player, and with his age and experience, he'd done more damage to me than I did to him. He's also used to playing at these stack depths on a daily basis, whereas I'm only doing it if I'm having a very big day, and by the time I'm having a day that big, I'm probably only going to be in the game for so much longer anyway. So in this scenario, there's a lot more working against me than for me. My only advantage is I have kings, which, he probably can't beat. Keyword probably. But because of all the other advantages he does have, I didn't want to 4-bet him out of position with 600 big blinds. That is going to set things up for me to really fuck up somehow, some way, at some point, far too often. But just calling his 3-bet to 400 really isn't much better, because there's no doubt this pot is going to go 4 ways. We're all really deep, and I'm out of position against everybody. So despite having kings, I am just already in a totally fucked situation. Fucked in the sense that no matter what I do, I'm going to have to navigate some very complicated circumstances. But I just didn't like the idea of 4-betting a player who is better than me and more experienced with these stacks and has position. So I'll just call and presumably play 4 ways out of position. I've done that plenty of times, just never with a hand anywhere close to as strong as the one I have. But playing like a tricky style has always been something that felt natural for me to do. When I first started playing in casinos, my first thought was just play different from everyone else, because how am I going to really stand out and induce big mistakes and win if I just do what everyone else is doing? So as expected, we go 4 ways, and the flop comes 9-7-5, 2 hearts, and I have the king of hearts. The pot has 16-30. And since I've already taken a highly unconventional line to playing this hand, I guess I decided why stop here. So I did something you're also never ever supposed to do, especially on this board, I'm sure, and that was donk lead for $900. The first guy after me called, and the next 2 guys folded. As the 3-better reg folded, he gave me a funny look, which to me meant it seemed like he already knows, or is at least sensing that I have something that's strong, but in a peculiar way. Now, before I continue, let me explain why I donk led 900. Well, for starters, donking this flop with a big hand was something people did back then. So by doing this, the table is going to give me credit for having a lot of 2 pairs or sets. But at the same time, if anyone else flopped 2 pair or better, they still probably would have raised me to 2,200 or something. And whether that's sensible or not, this is the way people would often play back then. And if someone did raise, then I'd have just folded, because they're going to assume I have a big hand. So if they're raising, then they have to have kings beat. So in essence, I was over-repping my hand by strengthening the raising ranges of everybody else. Except I was doing that on purpose, because at the same time, depending on what the turn card is, my hand could still be very strong by then. I mean, there's a lot of bad turn cards, but this hand, it has some sneaky strength about it, because it's an overpair that is going to beat all the 1-pair hands, unless the 3-better has aces. But if anyone besides the 3-better calls, then I know for sure I got them beat for the time being. So all right, 1 player called, we're heads up now. And the turn was a jack, and it was also a second spade. So 10-8 is now the nut straight. Jack-9 for top 2 pair is now a possibility. And there's also 2 flush draws. And okay, I decided I've been idiotic enough now. So let's just see what he does. So I check. And he works it for a little while, and then he bets 2,000 into 3,400. And the first thing I thought was, kings are probably still good here, because if he had me beat, I think it had just gone bigger. Probably at least 2,700. I hadn't played that much with this guy, but I had a pretty strong sense that on a coordinated board like this one, if he can beat kings, he's going to bet much closer to the pot size than the size he picked. So I actually like my chances right now. Now I just got to decide what I'm going to do. Now, cash was still allowed on the table at the time, and it looked like he had a $5,000 strap behind about another $2,020 chips. Now, he and I weren't friends, but we knew each other, so let's just call him Waldo. I asked him, Waldo, is that $5,000 in cash you have back there? And he said, yeah, I got about $5,000 in cash and about $2,000 here, and he sounded a little anxious. I said a second ago that I knew him, and here's how. In the previous couple of months, I'd started going out to the nightclubs and partying with other poker players and doing Molly and going to the strip club after. Talk about living right. But he was always there. So I got to see him in social settings with friends in an environment where he's relaxed and having fun, just like lip filler was when Amarillo Slim ordered her some tea. And I was thinking about that story as I began bracing myself for what I knew I was going to do. I saw and hung out with Waldo and talked to him enough and saw what he was like when he's relaxed. But now I asked him not about how he liked his hand, just confirming how much money he had in play. And now I can see he's not relaxed. So this is like almost identical to the story with Amarillo Slim. The only difference is, and it's a big one, is Slim created his scenario, whereas I suddenly caught on when mine was happening. Now, it took me a minute or two to work up the courage, because not only am I inexperienced at these stack depths, I'm also about to stick my life in with an unconventionally played overpair in a spot where I could be dead. Now, given his stack was a little less than the pot size, I don't know why I didn't just jam over his $2,000 bet. Maybe it was nerves, maybe it was the experience, maybe it was both. In any case, I raised, but only about half the pot to $5,600 total, and then he immediately went all in for another $3,400. And once he does that, now I have to be beat, but I'd already committed to this hand in my mind, so I snap called, and he asked, "You want to run it twice?" I said, "I always go once. If you win, you win." Sort of a pride and purity thing, but I guess I just believed in issuing max pain. I don't care how big the pot is. I want someone to get it, and I want them to get it bad. It's okay if it's me, because pain is good for any poker game. Now, before we ran it, I also added, I'm a little nervous about this one, and not even because the pot was close to $21,500. I was just nervous about how brutally I might be about to embarrass myself getting a million blinds in with a one-pair hand played in this manner, drawing dead or almost dead. The river paired the 5, and it was also a third heart. So, I don't know. But he instantly said, "You're good." All right. That was a little easier than expected. At 2-5, they would have sat there in disbelief for a week in a $300 pot if they were sure they lost right then and there. Now, it was his action to show first, but we've all done this multiple times. Sometimes when you're all in for a big pot, you just have so much emotion pumping that even when it's the other guy's action, once he makes it clear to you that he can't win, and you know this guy's not going to slow roll you, you just turn your hand over right away like there's like a deadline. You do it as fast as you can because you're just so relieved. You're ecstatic from that relief. Now, given that I played this hand about as bizarrely as you can imagine, when I turned it over, you could tell the whole table was shocked. You could just see it on people's faces. Just how, like, dumbfounded. That's what it was. They were just dumbfounded to see that that was what I turned over. That was the hand I put all this money in, playing it this way, and thought it was the best hand, and now won. And when Waldo saw my cards, he just said, "Nice hand. Totally defeated. Stacked." And he just walked away with his head down and his tail between his legs like no one I'd ever seen. Because everyone just saw him get completely and utterly and thoroughly owned. Now, the guy sitting on my right was a friend, and he was the guy at the Bellagio 1020 for several years, and this was during that run. He was at or near the top of the big winners. No one was respected more than he was, but he told me I could not have done that. Now, that hand will always be like a career-defining moment because the totality of that hand every decision I made during it and why I made it summed me up completely. Because all the particular ways I'd always looked at the game and all the different skills and approaches I'd always focused on having all came together in this one pot. And I would not have had a moment like this if I didn't deserve it. And all the regs that saw this hand all got to see the biggest reason why I win, because I'm capable of something like this. A couple of years later, I talked to the other pro who was in that hand. Not the one who 3-bet, just the other guy who was in the pot but didn't get to do anything. When he brought it up, he described it as that hand you played against Waldo, where you played the hand as bad as you can possibly play it, but at the same time, like, played it completely amazing. And he's right. Fundamentally speaking, there is nothing about this that, like, makes any sense. I know that. I was aware of it while that was happening. But the senselessness kind of ended up being what gave it sense. Because you can break the rules to something once you know what they are. Once you know and fully understand and respect why any rule is a rule, then you can step outside the lines. So I know why I'm supposed to 4-bet kings in a spot like this. I don't need anyone to explain that to me. But I didn't want to, and I knew why my reasons for doing so weren't stupid. They're risky, but it wasn't just a blind button click. And all the same, I know why the rule says never donk bet this flop into 3 other players, but I wanted to, and I knew my reasons for doing so weren't stupid. They're risky, but it wasn't just a blind button click. I know why the rule is I can't check raise the turn with this hand to any size, no less call up a 3-bet jam, but I wanted to, and one more time, I knew why I did. I was trying to navigate some really murky waters, and it was really dangerous, and I was also very lucky that everything played out as it did. I mean, there are other turn cards that, I don't know, he may have been able to win with or bluff me with. I mean, there are a lot of things that could have gone wrong, because there are a lot of runouts that are bad for this hand, but if they're good, your hand is like sneakily golden. All that said, yes, I know, of course I'm lucky the hand played out this way, but you make your own luck, and it has to happen. I knew how much trouble I might be getting into myself, start to finish. But I had a plan for each street. Like I said in that other show, he was just trying to, just pick those invisible numbers out of the air. And if you do, sooner or later, just something incredible has to happen. Whether it's one gigantic hand or just a long run or a tournament, anything. Because poker just has a funny way of making itself up to you. Sometimes it just seems to all come rushing back in one night, sometimes in one pot. So after this pot, I was up over $17,000 in the session, and riding a pretty sig high from making such a soul read and just everything. But naturally, I finished the night up only $3,000, and then I came back a day later and lost another $10,000. So after my peak moment, I promptly went backwards 24,000 over what was probably no more than 8 hours of combined play, and that's just poker, isn't it? And I really wasn't distracted at any point from the euphoria of that hand. I mean, I was excited, but whatever. Just continue playing after, and this is just what happened. Because at the end of the day, that was just one hand. It was just what happened in that hand, and once it's done, you just go on. You don't gain any invincibility, even though it feels like you are when you're running hot. Doesn't matter. Every hand is independent, and anything can happen, and just no matter how things are going, disaster is always just one hand away, and so is getting right back on track again. Now here's the funniest and sickest and also the most rewarding part about this hand with the kings. When I came back the next day to go lose another 10,000, the Vietnamese reg was there. He was playing in the other 10-20 game, and he told me that he saw Waldo between that hand and now, and he was claiming that he had 9-7, meaning he got the money in with 2 pair, but was counterfeited on the river since my hand finished as kings and 5s. As soon as he said that, I said, yeah, right. I was like, if he had that hand, he'd have hit the fucking ceiling and immediately turned it over to show everybody about what an excruciating beat he just took by getting sucked out on, losing to an 8-outer with 1 card to go in a pot that was well over 21,000. This guy was an egomaniac. I haven't mentioned that yet. You're going to tell me that an egomaniac is going to get that river with a 2-pair hand and just immediately tell me you're good. He's going to assume there is no hope whatsoever that he won, and then on top of that, not show his cards after seeing what he lost to, and then just walk out of there looking like a 5-year-old who just had his puppy run away from home? Who the fuck is he kidding trying to save face that he flopped 9s and 7s? So now the question is, what did he have? Well, my guess is he had either 6-4 or 6-3 of spades. Both of those were open-ended straight draws on the flop that turned to flush draw and bricked. I guess he could have had ace-6 or ace-8 of spades or maybe some other silly spade draw that didn't have that much equity on the flop but turned a lot of equity. Whatever it was, that's what he had. He would not instantly say, you're good, with anything except a draw that missed, and it was probably 6 high. But it doesn't end here, because 6 months later, we were both at a July 4th party, and I ran into him, and he brought that hand up. He told me he had 8-5. So first I heard he claimed he had 9-7. Now I'm hearing from him directly that he had 8-5. And that I found to be quite interesting, because if he had 8-5, then that means he rivered trip 5s, which I couldn't beat. Remember, the board ran 9-7-5, Jack, 5, with 3 hearts. I said to him, 8-5. He's like, yeah. I was like, really? So you just didn't want to show that you had the best hand and take the pot? And then I reminded him of what the board was. He was like, oh, yeah. He's like, oh, then I had 9-7. I was like, oh, okay. I'm like, so then why did you instantly say you're good as soon as the river came out? He said, like, very defensively, he's like, because I knew you had an overpair. This went back and forth for a little while. And then he's like, I will take a polygraph on this. He's like, and I'll give you like 3-1 odds that I pass. And even that was suspect. Because his ego is so big that if he was like telling the truth about having me beat before the river, I mean, he would have said, like, I'll bet you everything. I'll bet you this. I'll bet you my house. I'll bet you my fucking car. Like, I mean, he would have put everything on there to pass a polygraph. But he's lying. He still thinks he can pass it, so he's going to give me 3-1 odds. I don't even remember how much money the bet was. But believe it or not, for like a moment, I was actually like almost getting convinced by this nonsense because he was so persistent about it. I guess I just couldn't believe he was so persistent about it and not be telling the truth. But it was only for a moment's time, because the instant I started to feel my belief shift, it immediately shifted back, and I said, Waldo, like, there's no way, and I didn't believe him, and then I just walked away. And that was it. He's lying, and he knows that I know he's lying. The end. But why do all that? Why try to convince me I sucked out? Well, like I said, he's an egomaniac. He does not want me believing that I owned him as badly as I did, because he doesn't want me to have that confidence for playing against him in the future. And his only hope at that happening comes from the fact that he never actually turned his cards over. It was a valiant effort on his part trying to make me second guess what happened that day, but it failed. And he'd have been far better off in just accepting that he got sunned that day and do what he can to prevent others from sunning him in the future. But this is how some people deal with defeat. All right. That'll wrap things up for the week. Still don't know if I'm going to play this week. Maybe. Maybe not. If so, I'm sure I'll have some funny stories of people being stupid, but if not, I'll be sure to have something else cooked up. We'll see you next time.